Good evening. Can you hear me? All right, awesome. My name is Patricia Johnson, and I would like to welcome you to the Martin Luther King Speech and Essay Contest Finals. This is the 19th year that the Palmetto Youth Center has hosted this event. This year, we received 213 essays from middle and high school students throughout Manatee County addressing one of the following topics. If Dr. King were alive, what do you think he would say to the youth of today? Or, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, if I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way. What does this quote mean to you? The Martin Luther King contest is comprised of a written and an oral component. The written entries were evaluated based on how the student complied with the rules of the contest, how they addressed the topic, the effectiveness of the introduction and conclusion, and how innovative the approach to the topic was. Tonight's oral presentations will be evaluated based on all aspects of the speech's delivery. Each finalist will be asked to present his or her essay tonight. Please state your name, school, and grade level before you begin. That's your name, your school, and your grade level before you begin. Before we get started, I would like to introduce the judges for this evening. We have Palmetto Youth Center board members, Frida Bellamy and Kenyatta Randall. And I would like to welcome our newest judge, Brenda Harvey, for joining the judging crew. We will begin the competition with the middle school category, and then immediately following the middle school students, we'll move directly into the high school students. There will be 11 middle school finalists and 10 high school finalists. We will begin with number 1 in the middle school category. So, number 1, come on up. If you need to adjust the microphones, you can move them up or down, and then there's a stepping stool if you need them. So,
thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Melania. I attend Dr. Mona Jane Middle School as an 8th grader. Who did you look up to as a child? In my generation, there are not role models who are not influencers through music, fashion, fame, TV, or social media. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave all citizens in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement someone to look up to and ultimately to represent citizens young and old, what we as a country aspire to become. When you do a Google search of the most influential people today, the results are names like Donald Trump, Beyonce, Steve Jobs, the list goes on for miles. None of these role models are specifically aimed towards students. For example, Donald Trump can be controversial and isn't appealing to all. Beyonce is only well known because of her influence through music, fashion, and social media industries. Steve Jobs is famous for his engineering expertise. So why is it that all of these people are solely driven by money and fame? Why is there nobody to mentor us through our young adult years to grow into successful adults and teach us to make a difference? This generation needs someone who is unbiased, unrelated to religion, fame, money, controversy, the list goes on, to mentor us through our teen and adult years. The absence of this role model is most definitely the downfall of our generation. In contrast, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a beacon for the youth of generations past, but today there isn't someone who possesses these same characteristics. His influence was created to instill growth with freedom, equality, and peace. I believe that today, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would mentor the youth population and help drive us to success and make a change in the world, to make us as a society better and brighter as a whole, to strive to be more than just academic excellence, more than just good social status, to be more than just students in a classroom. He would want us to be innovators, to be thinkers, to be creative, to be the people of change. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, intelligence plus character, that is true education. Now you might be sitting here thinking to yourself, what is she talking about? Doesn't she see all the mentors around her, the teachers, peers, parents, and what most of you are probably thinking, guidance counselors. I can tell you right now that none of my peers have the experience to help plan for my future in life. Most of my teachers care strictly about my current academic success, and my parents aren't even aware of the opportunities being offered to me today. That leaves guidance counselors. At Manatee High School, approximately 460 students are assigned to each counselor. I would love to question the Manatee School Board on how these guidance counselors are able to truly touch each student academically, as well as delve into their personal life, when they just give them simply too many students. To be able to see each student just once, they would have to see at least 2 students per day. If there's no one in the general population to influence us, and we have no one to guide us anywhere else, who is supposed to represent us in the real world? Who is supposed to help us grow up successfully and secure stable jobs, financial balance, and an overall well-being if we lack leadership, mentorship, and a good general influence? So what do I think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would say to the youth of today? I think he would start by making a foundation for our youth to be able to grow and thrive without the fear of taking a wrong turn, and give general guidance on the importance of our growth as a nation, to fight for our dreams, and to never, ever give up, no matter what. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at the times of challenge and controversy. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Spencer Boyer. I am from Dr. Mona Jane Middle School, and I am in 8th grade. The time is always right to do what is right. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said this, and it is a true statement. He was arrested several times for doing the right thing, civil disobedience, to protest the unjust Jim Crow laws and segregation in the South where he grew up. He soon would become one of the most famous civil rights activists of all time. He is also well known for his I Have a Dream speech. In that very speech, he mentions his children as well as the youths of all generations. This begs the question, what would Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say to the youth of today? He would say to continue the legacy that he has started, which would be to respect all people and see them as equals. He would say to not allow politics dictate who you like as a friend, teacher, or family member, and not to become aggressive against any other party. One other belief he would share with the youth of today is to treat everyone with respect. To start off, although we have come a long way, it is still our duty, our obligation to continue Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy, his journey to treat all people equal and to respect all, no matter their race, ethnic background, or their social status. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man of great ideas and of great beliefs. He believed that peace, love, and equality were more powerful than hate, malice, and racial separation. He would disapprove of violence against anyone for any reason. He would say to the youth of today that it is unjust or wrong to assume something, especially negative, about a person based on their looks rather than the character of their heart. I believe he would want everyone to love each other just as they are. Next, he would disapprove of how negative politics has become and explain to the youths that we can all have different ideas and views without attacking one another. I believe that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would appreciate the fact that children are more involved in politics and believe that they can make an impact. He used politics as a tool to help his cause for equal treatment of all. He would tell the youth that it does not matter what someone believes, but how they treat the other side of the argument, or in this case, the political spectrum. He would encourage children to have their own independent ideas and views. I believe he would like everyone to see everyone take a different approach on how to discuss politics and come together, even when they do not agree. Last, but certainly not least, he would tell the youth to display respect to all and to themselves. He would express concern about the lack of respect and integrity used not only in real life, but in the world of the internet and social media. I believe he would be upset at the cyberbullying in the digital world and be upset to see some youth use discriminatory language against others. It would pain him to hear some teenagers use words he has heard directed towards him during his lifetime. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would find it hard to comprehend that some youth do not respect anyone, maybe even themselves. Dr. King would ask that everyone show respect to each other. In conclusion, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would tell the youth to treat everyone with respect, decency, humility, and equality. He would say politics should not be a great divide. One more thing he would say is show respect to all, no matter what. Imagine if we did these things at school and online, maybe these issues would be solved or not occur at all. We should remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his work and ask ourselves the question, what would Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say to the youth of today? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Brooke Lashke, and I attend Carlos E. Hale Middle School as an 8th grader. Martin Luther King Jr. had a major impact on our youth, even still today. Mr. King was a Baptist minister and a social activist who took part in many events. He was born January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, and was assassinated on April 4, 1968. Mr. King played a key role in the American Civil Rights Movement, as well as winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. To start off, Martin Luther King Jr. was very wise in speaking out to the public. In his speech, I Have a Dream, which took place August 28, 1963, was to try and stop racism in the USA. Some quotes from Mr. King, such as "The time is always right to do something right," and "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear," show how Mr. King encourages people to always be kind. He states, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." This shows kindness always wins. If Mr. King were here to speak to our youth of today, I would believe he would tell us to always be kind to others. You never really know what someone could be going through. To continue, I think Mr. King would also mention things teens deal with daily. Some things would most definitely be bullying, peer pressure, drugs or vaping, racism, and the list goes on. In all honesty, the main things I would want to focus on is bullying and peer pressure. Those are two major things that happen every day in your school or neighborhood. In Mr. King's speech, he explains his dream of a world where racism ends, still today an ongoing problem, as well as explaining how all men are created equal. No matter what race, condition, or life, everyone should be treated the same. Our society today still has trouble accepting that fact. If Mr. King were to be able to talk to our society, he should read his speech or sections of it to show people the reality or how our world should be. Lastly, another very important quote spoken by Mr. King is, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? You should always ask yourself, could I make someone's day better, or what could I do to achieve my goal?" Martin Luther King Jr. would ask us what good things we've maybe done in the past day, week, or even month. Would we be able to answer it? That choice is always yours to help others. It would most definitely make our nation a much better place if we did one good deed a day. In conclusion, Martin Luther King Jr. has a lot of impact on our nation and our youth still to this day. That's why we celebrate him on the third Monday of January every year. Mr. King quotes, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty we are free at last," showing a final victory of hard work. Thank you.
My name is David Connolly, and I attend Mona Jane Middle School, and I'm in 8th grade. If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This is one of thousands of Dr. King's famous and meaningful quotes. If one can do great things, then do them. But if you have no chance to, do what you can in a great way. Dr. King had a system in that quote. The word "if" is probably the most important part of his words. What he's saying is not an excuse not to try. Most people have the opportunity to make a big difference in this world, but if another person doesn't, Dr. King is saying that you should try to do great things first, then try smaller, less significant deeds. Doing smaller actions in a great way can benefit the world more than if you do greater things. For instance, if everyone would stop discriminating others on things they can't control, like skin color or gender, the world would be a much better place. This is just like how Dr. King's influence helped people change their ways. This man was terrific at doing great things and doing small things in a great way. The downside is, doing small things usually go unnoticed. I think that Dr. King would say that the world needs to recognize small actions more because they do make more of a difference. Dr. King would probably say from all the chaos in the world that the youth needs to straighten up. I think that he would believe the youth is selfish and needs to stop doing their own thing. They need to be more humble and more sympathetic. Although teens are selfish nowadays, I know that Dr. King would want to focus on the future rather than dwell on the past. Dr. King was a great man, and some of his actions didn't go noticed. That didn't stop him from making a difference. As said, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was good at doing great things and small things. That's probably what led him to this quote. He would say to the world, in order to make a better influence on the next generations, we would need to do things to make a difference, big or small. He would want his country to collect their actions and be more appreciative of what they have, focus on the mental health of kids, teach them to influence smaller ones as they will strive to be like them, and overall be an amazing leader and American hero. Now, as a couple of decades of work come near, Dr. King would strive in making the world a better place, so you should too. Don't dwell on things that don't matter, like popularity or social media, because it likely won't matter in a couple of years. Go out in the world and make a difference, big or small. Thank you.
Good evening. I hope you all are enjoying your time here. My name is Angelina Gooden-Gench. I am from Dr. Mona Jane Middle School, and I'm an 8th grader. No lie can live forever. These are the true words once stated by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If Dr. King was here today, he would tell the youth to wake up from their lies. Wake up from the nasty reality that we allow ourselves to be consumed by every day. Dr. King would tell the youth that they need to demolish these lies. These lies they use to cover up the sad truth that after all these years later, after Dr. King's time, the issues that he protested against are still very well alive and breathing. Dr. King was a strong community activist and protester. He spoke on issues such as racism, equality, freedom, rights, and peace. Today's youth are aware of these issues, but they do not speak on them. They treat them as if so they are forbidden. If Dr. King was alive, he'd be disappointed. He'd be disappointed that the youth has given up on his dream, given up on fighting for a better world, a world where we're equal and treated fairly. Dr. King would tell the youth that they need to speak up. Speak up on what they're witnessing, speak up on the unjust actions that they see taking place. Dr. King would tell them that their silence will do them no good, that being quiet never got anybody anywhere. Dr. King would mark on the fact that we need to work together. Today's youth is still immensely divided. We still make racial slurs and judge each other on looks. When today's youth presents these actions, they make Dr. King's dreams look unfulfillable. Dr. King once stated in his I Have a Dream speech, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Dr. King would tell the youth that they need to talk to people as if so they lost their sight. This would be the only true way that they would be able to know people for their morals, their actions, not for the color of their skin. After Dr. King expresses his thoughts, I believe that he would try to get the youth to set aside their differences and work together for a better cause. He would try to get the youth to understand the importance of today's issues like racism, hate crimes, and equality. I think that Dr. King would encourage the youth to try and solve these problems, one day at a time, little by little, because in the end, doing this, little by little, it's better than not doing anything at all. Although Dr. King might be heartbroken by the youth's actions and the way they are handling these issues, I think Dr. King will still be as persistent as he once was when he was alive in the words he used to help the nation. Dr. King would spark something in the youth, something no influencer today is able to do. With this spark would follow a new dream, a dream of the youth's generation being successful in solving these issues and hate in the nation, once and for all, by simply overlooking our differences and coming together and working as one. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Layla Ward. I am 8th grade and I'm from Dr. Moen J. Middle School. 12 years, 3 months, 30 days, and 18 hours. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for equality, not just for Birmingham, Alabama, but for the whole world. All the pain, suffering, and long sleepless nights. For what? Nothing. Physically, we may not be segregated anymore, but mentally we are. How is it that the youth of today are privileged enough to live together in harmony, yet we choose to live in division and with antagonism towards one another? On August 28, 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. uttered these famous words, free at last, thank God Almighty we are free at last," on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. But if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was still alive today, I am sure he would have added, but there is still work to be done, for we still live in bondage. I can envision Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and I sitting around discussing our views on the world. While sitting, I tell Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. how, as a youth in today's society and an African-American young woman, I am privileged enough to live and enjoy life and go to school with my fellow peers from different races, religions, and backgrounds. But every single day, I am singled out emotionally by those of the same race as me. It's not just me. Many individuals have been disparaged by their peers from stereotypes that no one knows the origin of. Kids are bullying each other because they don't fit a certain mold, but each kid that's bullying brings us closer and closer to segregation and farther away from freedom, freedom that you, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and my ancestors fought for years, and freedom that we are taking for granted. I would express my frustration that he expressed to our country that now is the time for a change, when he said now is the time to make justice reality for all of God's children. It will be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the movement. Where it seemed immediately after those words were spoken, things started to change for the better, only to be destroyed into something null and void in the future. And after hearing all I had to say, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. looked at me and said, "Now, child, the fight for freedom and equality is a long and treacherous fight, one that can only be achieved by small steps, where we take every victory and thank God for the next. But we must continue to fight with love, not violence." Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. died fighting for what he believed in, justice. From the famous "I Have a Dream" speech, in which Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says, "No, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. One day, right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today, to live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of the skin, but by the content of the character." It was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, to live in a nation where they have the freedom to be who they want to be, to not be judged by their skin color, but before judging the content of their character. But that's not the case. The kids of today are quick to judge not by how their peers' beliefs, but before judging their hair, their skin, or even how they look. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., if he was here to witness what is happening in our society, he would tell us that it takes faith to move a mountain, and we must come together and move this mountain called inequality. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spent 12 years, 3 months, 30 days, and 18 hours to fight to where we are today, free of segregation. But how long will it take to rid the youth of the hatred and division among us? Thank you.
My name is Julisha Ferguson. I'm in 6th grade. I go to Sugg Middle School. I believe that big changes are made up of small ideas from people like me. The civil rights movement was a large moment led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. that helped all people get equal rights. However, this big moment was strengthened by small moves from other known people. Dr. Martin Luther King once said, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." I think he said this to be a motivation to unknown people, to let them know that their help is appreciated and needed in order to the moment to be a success. During the civil rights movement, the goal was to achieve one great ideal, equal rights. However, equality couldn't be achieved without smaller individual contributions.
My name is Corey, and I'm from Johnson Middle School, and I'm an 8th grader. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." What this quote means to me, it inspires me to do small things, and maybe one day it will be a great thing. King knew that his actions couldn't have changed the way people may have thought back then, and he knew his efforts would not have happened immediately. But the actions he did take would not go unnoticed, as they have changed American society forever. The things that King did, for example, inspiring sit-ins and organizing marches for civil rights. King's passion and determination for race equality changed history and paved the way for more aspiring activists. He inspired people to dream, to have a dream that was greater than themselves, a dream that they could look forward to, and in my opinion, that is legendary. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. inspired people to fight for what they believed in, even if it was just taking that first small step. This quote also reminds me of the community service project that I'm working on. It's about bullying and kids with autism and how they're sometimes treated as if they were dirt, and how they don't fit into today's society, much like how the African Americans were treated in the 1960s. This quote inspires me to push to my goal to educate others about autism and how they are not treated as equals, even though they should be. As I read over this quote again, his actions that he took make me want to follow in his footsteps, a path that he paved for equality and justice, the nonviolence that he stood for. It makes me feel good to know what King stood for, and it makes me want to better the world and the people around me. It makes me want to fight for the people who don't have a voice of their own. If King had the ability to get his message across to millions of people by taking small steps, by making small goals to reach an ultimate larger goal, then I know that I can do the same. I know that I will get my own message about autistic kids and equality for them and how they're treated compared to the rest of the world. I would want them, anyone and everyone for that matter, to live in a world where love exists and not hatred, where only understanding and compassion dwells, not ignorance. This was what Dr. King's goals were, his aspirations, his expectations were for the world. One of King's greatest gifts of all was the ability to inspire others to fight for what they believe in, to fight for equality. His words still continue to inspire others, including me, to follow in his footsteps, to continue helping others. It is amazing how his words still have an effect on people today, many years after his assassination. So what does this quote mean to me? It means that I can do anything, even if that means making smaller goals to reach a larger one. All it takes is just one small step at a time. Thank you.
I'm Sophie Bell. I go to Dr. Mona J. Middle School and I'm in 8th grade. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., what a wonderful man. He at the time made a truly unimaginable difference. Martin Luther King did many things in his life, a life that was sadly cut too short. Although by far one of his biggest accomplishments was that he inspired people. He inspired people to make a difference. No matter how big or how small, you can make a difference. Dr. King once said, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." This can mean things to many different people, but to me, it means that I can do anything, big or small. I am only 13. What can I do to help the problems in our world? I may not be able to talk to the President of the United States to ask him to fix gun violence or discuss climate change with the United Nations, but that doesn't mean I can't help. Dr. King was 13 when he was an assistant manager of a newspaper station. This is an incredible achievement for a 13-year-old. And I am sure it might not have been something big, but he did it in a great way. I spoke in front of my school board about why I believe they should not arm teachers. I wrote and said a speech. I was terrified. What if I didn't make sense? What if they didn't listen to me? What if? Later that night, they announced they are not going to arm teachers. Could it be that I could have persuaded their decision, that they listened to me? Maybe I saved a life. Maybe I stopped my friends from moving schools. Maybe I did something small in a great way. Maybe I made a difference like Martin Luther King Jr. did when he was a young activist. Sadly, he got arrested many times for his activism, but I am lucky enough not to get that hate towards me and my opinions. I care about a lot of things, one of them being immigration. When I grow up, I want to become a human rights lawyer. I want to go to college and study law. I want to help undocumented immigrants find a home in our wonderful country. Dr. King went to Morehouse College and got an education. This is probably one of the reasons people listen to him. I want to get an education just like him. There are about 10 million undocumented immigrants in the US. There is no possible way I can help all of them. That would be a great, huge thing. Although even helping one of them by becoming a human rights lawyer, I will know that I did something small in a great way. Knowing that I helped one family stay with their loved ones and stay in a safe home is an accomplishment I cannot wait to complete in the future. Finally, I am originally from England. This means I cannot be president. Maybe the world won't know my face as someone who made a difference, but that doesn't mean I can't make one. Just because I can't be president doesn't mean I can't make a change in this world. I could be in the House of Representatives or Senate. I could be a judge or work in the UN. All of these might not seem like a great thing, but I will do it in a great way. When Martin Luther King said his I Have a Dream speech, he could probably have only hoped to make as much of an impact as he did. Who knows? He didn't have to become president to make a huge difference. He just had to fight for what he believed in. Does that mean I don't either? This is how his legacy inspires me. In conclusion, Dr. King is an incredible man who inspired many people for different reasons. He showed people just like me that you don't have to do something big. All you have to do is do something you care about in a great way. From saying a speech to important people or having hopes in life, you can make a difference. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Destiny Talbert, and I'm in 8th grade at Carlos E. Hale Middle School. There have been many famous and inspirational quotes throughout history. However, a quote that has a lot of meaning and can be related to teens in this generation is, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." These wise words came from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in a time when our society was divided and in need to hear the powerful force of an individual voice. Dr. Martin Luther King was one of the most influential people in American history. Without him, we would not have equal rights, our country would not be fair or just, and we cannot truly say that America is the land of the free and the home of the brave. While analyzing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s words, the previously stated quote means that we were not able to accomplish groundbreaking things all the time. However, every action, word or decision, even if it seems little or insignificant, or we may think it will not make a difference, should be done with thoughtfulness and with as much effort as possible. Hence, if we give it our best shot and put a lot of effort into it, we might just make a difference in this world. In addition, this quote also means that we may not have the opportunity to make huge or tremendous changes in society, but can still gain success by trying our absolute best and taking pride in successful, small tasks. These little and simple actions will eventually build up and become the monumental things we all wish we could achieve. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, however, equality couldn't be achieved without smaller, individual contributions from prominent leaders and lesser-known advocates. Just because an active service or outreach is small doesn't mean it's not quality. He said this during the Civil Rights Movement, in a time when it seemed impossible to achieve equal rights. Therefore, this shows that when each person in a community is actively involved, they can contribute by doing small acts. These acts will eventually add up and contribute to their common goal. In the end, together, they will all be able to achieve something life-changing and groundbreaking that they once thought was impossible. Also, Yale University stated that King, of course, did both. In actions great and small, he has helped to change the course of American society, an inspiration to us all. This quote shows that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. has helped to change the course of American society in general in a great way. Because he did all this, he changed history and made a huge impact on the future of all Americans. In conclusion, the quote, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way," has a great significance for today's society, especially for our generation. It means that no matter how simple or small the task may seem, you must always do it with a purpose, as well as putting your best effort into it, because in the end, although you may not be able to do monumental things, every little thing has the potential to turn into great achievements. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Miles Fairman, and I attend Hale Middle School, and I'm in 8th grade. If Dr. Martin Luther King were still alive, I think he would tell the youth of today to be more active in their community. Today's youth is a lot different than the youth of the 1960s. The youth of the 1960s didn't have smartphones, colored televisions with Disney Plus, computers, or the internet. We have all these luxuries today and use them more than we should. Dr. King would want us to do better for our world and to stay in touch with reality versus the virtual reality of our digital world. Dr. King would want our generation to be more connected with each other, not over text, but face to face. He would want us to go to more social gatherings, like meeting up with friends to go to an amusement park, or going to an animal shelter to assist in saving our favorite animal. If Dr. King was still with us, our society would be more connected. He helped colored people have equality they deserved, just like non-colored people. Today, everybody has equal rights, but if Dr. King was watching us, he would see that some humans are being very judgmental. People judge each other on the most trivial things. Both kids and adults judge each other. Adults evaluate the worth of each other on how much money someone has or how good they are at their job. The youth are even worse. They judge their peers on how skilled they are at a video game or even their fashion. Dr. King would definitely put an end to those trivialities. Unfortunately, Dr. King isn't with us. He has now passed the torch to us, and we are now responsible for our actions and how we should treat others. Another point that Dr. King would mention to us would be to have more leaders rise from our youth. Like him, he was a leader and an influencer. Since we spend a lot of time on our devices, some people lack communication skills. Those people who are isolated socially need someone to look up to. If people look up to you, it makes you feel that you have successfully changed another person's life. For example, in the time of Dr. King, colored people didn't have a voice and were treated unfairly. People were scared to stand up because they were afraid of being punished. When Dr. King stood up, people started looking up to him and treated him with respect. The final thing that Dr. King would tell the youth of today would be to, when they grow up, be the leaders that they needed. There will always be someone in need and someone who needs to be heard. If the youth of today fix their current issues, they will make the world a better place. The youth of today can help fix our country's foreign affairs. In conclusion, Dr. King wouldn't be disappointed with today's youth, but he would definitely give us some suggestions on how to fix the problems that plague us. He would want us to be more active in our community and to help us be more social. He would desire us to be kind to each other so that we can live happier lives. He would want us to be the leaders so that we can help others who don't have a voice. The final thing that Dr. King would want us to do is, as we grow older and become more educated, we realize that building relationships with one another, no matter what race or religion we are, will help the world become a more peaceful place. It would be nice to still have a now 90-year-old Dr. King with us, but it is up to today's youth to fix today's problems. Because sadly, Dr. King and his legacy are gone, and it is up to our generation to guide the future. Thank you.
Hello, I am Nick Stanley. I go to Lakewood Ranch High School, and I am in the 12th grade. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15, 1929. He was born into a family who had served as pastors of the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. During his life, he grew up in a world surrounded by racism. This was an unimaginable world compared to today's standards. Dr. King, in his fight to achieve equal rights, said, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." To me, this quote means only one thing. You cannot expect to do the great things if you cannot do the little things correctly. When I hear this quote by Dr. King, maintaining a positive mindset and setting goals are the small things that he mentions. I saw this firsthand in my experience on a team sport. The little things to some people are just that, little. But the little thing of maintaining a positive mindset does matter. Without a positive mindset, you will not be able to see improvement. On my 12-man Raider team, we compete against other schools in the county. At our first competition, we ended up coming in first out of all the schools in the county. The next week, during practice, our coach noticed that we were not giving 100% of our effort during practice, which was true because to us, it was our first practice after the win. Our coach ended up calling us over for a talk, and in this talk, he stated that we need to get our mindset right because we cannot go into the next meet acting like we are already going to win. If we cannot handle winning one meet, how could we win the state title? Dr. King understood this. When his house was bombed on January 30th, 1956, he addressed an angry crowd of his supporters and urged them to maintain peace instead of violence. He had to handle his supporters correctly because a violent response would only lead to more violence and would in turn jeopardize his end goal of equality. Maintaining a positive mindset is a small thing that must always be present for you to achieve great things. When faced with a huge obstacle, you need to set goals in order to conquer it. Setting goals will allow you to start with a small challenge and work your way up to achieve that impossible challenge. My first time coming out to practice with our Raider teams, the farthest I have ever ran was a mile. My end goal was trying to keep up during a 3-mile run. I first started out small with my goal of running a mile without stopping. Once I achieved this goal, I set another goal and eventually made it to my end goal. Dr. King, in his fight to achieve equal rights, also started off with a small goal. He started off with the Montgomery Bus Boycott. Dr. King and his supporters staged a mass protest by not riding the buses in Montgomery, Alabama. The Supreme Court ruling that segregation on public buses was unconstitutional ended these protests. A bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama had led to equality on buses across the nation. Setting goals is another small thing that must always be present for you to achieve great things. Dr. King had an end goal that he alone could not achieve without help. His quote, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way," means to do the little things correctly, because without them, you will not be able to do the big things correctly. To me, the small things Dr. King mentions are maintaining a positive mindset and setting goals, because without them, you can never tackle your great challenge. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Delaney and I go to Lakewood Ranch High School and I'm a sophomore. So Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a loyal leader of the civil rights movement in the 1960s. He was a Baptist minister and a social rights activist. He was a faithful husband to his wife and a loving father to his 2 daughters and his 2 sons. He was assassinated because he stood up for African Americans in order to gain justice. Dr. King believed that treating one another with love like a brother would allow us to live peacefully without perishing. He stated, "I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word." If Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, I think he would want to tell the youth of today that the color of our skin does not define our character, that each and every individual has a purpose, and to not conform to whatever culture says to. Furthermore, my generation seems to be classifying and judging one another based on how many Instagram followers each of us have, rather than allowing love to have the final word. Dr. King stated, "We have flown the air like birds and swum the sea like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth like brothers." When we truly love one another like a brother, there's no room for hatefulness because there's an abundance of appreciation. Dr. King also stated, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." I think he would want to remind my generation that we all have veins with blood running through them. We are all saved by the same blood. We all have 10 fingers and 10 toes. We all have a beating heart that pumps blood to the rest of our body. We all have a soul and a working brain. The color of our skin is not a part of our identity. Additionally, while reading quotes from his famous speeches, King seems to see individuals in a crowd of people. Dr. King stated, "You don't need to have a degree to serve. You only need a heart full of grace and a soul generated by love." He seems to count a crowd by ones, not by hundreds, knowing that every single person has a name and a unique story specifically assigned to him or her. Because of his perspective on a crowd, he was able to serve individuals better. He also stated, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" I view Martin Luther King Jr. as a humble leader who is determined to receive equality by loving and serving one another. I think he'd want to inspire the young people of today that they are purposeful and can accomplish their purpose by simply loving people. Moreover, Dr. King was known for standing in courage as he fought the unjust opinions of laws of others. He stated, "There was a time when the church was very powerful, in the time when the early Christians rejoiced at being deemed worthy to suffer for what they believed. In those days, the church was not merely a thermometer that recorded the ideas and principles of popular opinions, but it was a thermostat that transformed the mores of society." King transformed history by refusing to bow down to the laws and voices telling him to just live with segregation. A thermometer adjusts to what the temperature is around it, no matter how hot or cold it is. However, a thermostat is used to control the heat in a room. While culture was cold-hearted toward racial equality, Martin Luther King Jr. decided to stand in compassion and mold culture into something that offered a warm and welcoming hand to every single person. I think we would want to encourage my generation to stand in courage and to not comply with culture. Dr. King's words are powerful, which allowed him to influence people then and even now. He led strongly and humbly, wanting each and every individual to be treated justly. If he were alive, I think he would want to tell the young people today that we should place our identity in our character, not the color of our skin, that each of us has a purpose to be accomplished, and to not conform to culture's requirements. I aspire to be as faithful and humble as Martin Luther King Jr. was. Thank you.
Hello everyone and good evening. My name is Talia Belchmey. I attend Lakewood Ranch High School and I am a sophomore. Okay. I have a nightmare. If Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, I believe he would say to the youth, "I have a nightmare." He would be upset over how the youth in our society today treat each other, disrespect one another, and how they show no respect to their elders most of the time. Our society has downgraded in many ways over the decades. How children of today are raised, taught, and act are a disappointment in comparison to what Dr. King had hoped and dreamed for. Dr. King would reference back to the days when it was simpler and less challenged. How he would describe that technology didn't dictate everyone's way of life. Youth nowadays rely on how many likes their last post got, how many people saw their last update. Social media is Dr. King's nightmare. He wanted all of us to become one united and whole, but with the way the youth acts today, that is certainly not possible. Dr. King would explain to our youth that we need to clean up our act and be the best and most respectful individuals we could ever possibly be. His main point would be that he did not work day in and day out, survive multiple attacks, and serve jail time to have all of that go to waste. And he would most definitely point out we're becoming segregated once again. Society is becoming segregated once more. Now, it may not be by race, but it is by popularity, opinion, and beliefs. Everyone, including all of the youth today, are so hard-headed, they think the only way possible is their way. Dr. King would also say he has hope. Hope that we can learn to become whole once more. It would break his heart to see the youth today. He would hope that we could learn from the past and decide to change the future in terms of history repeating itself. Dr. King knows what segregation does to others, and it is his dream of that never happening to any group of individuals ever again. Fact is, youth needs a change. It needs a refresher course on what happened in history. It was a terrible thing so many suffered, but it is in the past. And we have the chance to move forward. Dr. King would express the fact that he once had a dream and we made it reality. But social media, the nightmare, threatens our fresh reality. It's up to our youth to keep social media in check and realize the correct way to use social media resources. We need to start being smart about our internet websites, FaceTime, and texting because they don't show the intended emotion the user may be trying to convey. Dr. Martin Luther King would want us to FaceTime in real time and not via cell phone. This is the new threat that we must get in front of and stop before all we are is a world full of rich versus poor, person against person, and society against youth. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Giovanni Jean. I'm from Bayshore High School, and I am currently in the 11th grade. What is there to say to the youth of today? Can words sway our stubborn minds? Perhaps it's just that we don't understand how the world works, too busy on our phones all the time to figure it out. Our generation has a stereotype. You either have a promising future or no future in sight. If you voice your opinions, then most likely they're not right. And if you lack independence, then you wouldn't survive in life. If all this are true about us, then who would we listen to? Who could speak words to us that would instill hope? I believe if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were alive today, he could do it. After all, giving hope was his specialty. If Dr. King were alive today, to the youth, he would say, "They were wrong about you, and in time, they'll all see it too." The youth today is very misunderstood. We very well understand what is being told to us, but no way are we willing to conform to it. That by itself is a bold show of independency, which we are often accused of lacking. The youth of today gets that the adults to our generation envision the best for us. However, the best way for us to get there is to live our lives ourselves. Dr. King once said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." How are we to find our true selves in life if the course that we follow is not made by us? We don't ask that you leave us be or stay out of our lives indefinitely, because support is the one thing we need from adults. Support when we make mistakes, when we choose this over that, or just in general. Whenever I think about the world's viewpoint of the youth, I think about a certain quote: "Youth is wasted on the young." This acerbic quote, attributed to George Bernard Shaw and Oscar Wilde, sums up the feeling we get from the world. I don't feel as if I wasted my youth, and I hope that nobody else feels that way either. We shouldn't be made to feel like that. Experience is not a waste. Youth goes through life just like the adults have. We can admit to the error of our ways, and we can own up to it. Is it selfish of us youth to expect the same in return from our predecessors? Today's youth is not perfect, but neither are older generations. And with that common ground, neither of us are better than the other. To sum it up, the youth of today produces high school dropouts, gangbangers, pregnant at 16 females, and drug users. It also produces prodigies, heroes, revolutionaries, success stories, and at the end of the day, the future. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a man who saw the potential in people amidst controversial times. Is it too far off to believe that he would see the potential in the youth of today? After all, we grow controversial each day. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Angela Tuttle. I attend to Bayshore High School and I'm 11th grade. I'm kind of nervous, so yeah, my bad. Okay. If Martin Luther King Jr. was alive in this generation, I believe he would tell the youth of today to stay strong and keep the peace no matter what happens. Dr. King was all about fighting for human rights and establishing peace as well as equality, but not just for the Black community, but for anyone who has been mistreated or misrepresented. As a junior in high school, when I look around the world around me, I see the good and the bad, and the human mind is filled with many thoughts, some positive and some negative. I also see many negative thoughts of being acted upon. As mentioned earlier, Dr. King was one of the best leaders in American history. People have always been following him for a long time, even after death. I believe in my heart that he will motivate the youth to stop all the violence and help bring the community back together. Instead of ripping one each other apart or tearing each other down, we need to lift one each other up. When I look around my school, I see so many students seem depressed, angry, sad, and hurt. Usually these students are being hurt by other students or have a horrible home life. Violence does not fix things, rather it makes it worse. Some other advice I think Dr. King would tell the youth of today is to focus on education. Many of our schools do not have money to provide quality education. Although we have come a long way since education, we still do not have the same opportunities in school. I love that I'm able to have a mixed best friend and an expanded avid teacher love us so much. What I do not like is to see students struggle because there are not enough textbooks or resources. Dr. King fought for equality. It is evident that not all of us, the youth, have fair or equal schooling. I know Dr. King will encourage us to stand up for education and motivate the youth to attend school, try their best, and be a leader rather than a follower. Lastly, I think Dr. King will tell the youth, me, to start thinking about others before ourselves, to help the poor and the less fortunate, to help come up with solutions instead of being a part of the problem. As the next generation, we are going to be the ones who create and build jobs. We will be the ones who decrease climate change. We will be the ones who take shoes off our feet and give it to the kids on the street. We will be the teachers, the leaders, the doctors, and the nurses to take care of the sick. In this way, we need to step up our game and stop bullying one another, stop kicking one another down when we are down, and stop solving violence with violence. If Dr. King were alive, I know he would be in the streets protesting for peace, rallying for those who have been mistreated or speak for those who have no voice. Should we not do the same? What's the difference between now and then? We have more resources and more opportunities than we had back then. Why are we not using them in the right way? Why are some of us still staying silent and why are some of us still choosing hate? Dr. King was a hero for many and still is. I know that I tried to appropriate many of his dreams into my life. I did not always get it right, but I know I tried. I think as youth of today, we must try harder than we have. We need to be the change we wish to see. Just as Dr. King did, motivating people to do the right thing and do better for themselves can be a good start of changing the world. Thank you.
I'm Sydney Jamieson, and I'm a 10th grader at Lakewood Ranch High School. Out of all of the historical figures I have studied, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of my favorites. King once said, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." What does this quote mean to me? King made a lot of wise statements over the course of his life, and I will always look up to him because of his faith in the Lord and desire to do what was right. This quote fits very well with one of my most ambitious goals, to make the world a better place through volunteering for my church. The 15 years I have been on earth may not be much, but I think I've seen quite a lot, as I'm sure most 15-year-olds think. Much of my experience is based on volunteer work that I have done through my church, such as feeding the needy, teaching my preschool class, and leading our youth band. This quote reflects my life choices and decisions, how those choices made me who I am today, and what it will do for my future. The quote, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way," can be applied to many aspects of my life. As I said, I'm involved with lots of volunteer work. In my freshman year alone, I served about 300 volunteer hours, which is a lot. But here's the catch. I love volunteering. It brings me an overwhelming sense of joy to help others. No matter how much time and effort I must give, it is always worth it. I feel my love for volunteering correlates directly with this quote because although I may not be able to solve world hunger, I've given meals to needy families who couldn't even afford a room in the Salvation Army. I may not be a preacher or a teacher, but I've come to love my little preschool class at my church. I may not be the best singer, and I may never be, but I love leading youth worship at my church on Wednesday nights. As I passionately sing the Bible verses I do my best to live by, I shed tears as I see my fellow Christians raise their hand in worship towards the heavens, watching as they build their relationship with God. These tasks fill me with hope for a better tomorrow. It makes me think, maybe I can't lead everyone to come to accept Jesus as their Savior, but maybe I can plant a seed with the potential to grow into a strong and thriving faith within those around me. Maybe I'll never even get to see that seed grow and prosper, but I will continue living on happily knowing I made a positive difference in the lives of those around me. You could say I, like King, have a dream to be the working hands and feet of Christ, a dream to help the less fortunate, a dream to bring joy to toddlers as they sing songs on Sunday mornings, a dream to be a preacher, a dream to teach others about the salvation and never-ending love that can be found in the embrace of our God. I dream to make the world better, even if it's just a little. Even if my efforts are just one grain of sand among trillions in the middle of a desert as far as the eye can see. That one grain of sand matters. If everyone had a grain of sand, but we all assume that the desert has enough sand, so we never cast our one simple grain into the dunes, so there would be much less sand as the winds of time blow them all away. Our voices matter. Even if you're not making a huge immediate impact, every single little thing everyone contributes can lead us along a path for a better future. That's what Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way," means to me. Thank you.
My name is Ben Locke. I go to Lakewood Ranch High School, and I'm in 9th grade. It was once said that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. This quote speaks to me much like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s quote that states, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." It shows that despite the few sometimes having more power to change things, the many can also accomplish great things. Examples of this can be seen in the Underground Railroad and the creation of Israel. This is because when we look back in history, massive movements weren't always due to a singular person or group driving the change, but rather the many doing small things that were in the end not inconsequential. To start off, one example of small things being done in a great way was the thousands of Americans sheltering slaves during their escape to freedom. Scholastic states that as many as 100,000 slaves escaped on the Underground Railroad in between 1800 and 1865. 100,000 people is by no means an insignificant number, and this has made a large impact on our country that can still be seen today. It is also stated by the National Park Service that people of all races, classes, and genders participated in this widespread form of civil disobedience. This network was not made up of a few powerful people, but rather a massive number of citizens who all did their small part, which is how I see the Underground Railroad as the perfect embodiment of the quote by Dr. King. Furthermore, another prime example of what Dr. King referred to in his quote is the creation of Israel. By the end of World War II, millions of European Jews had been displaced from their homes, according to the Smithsonian. But despite the massive number of refugees, few had places to go. And that is why it was proposed to create a Jewish state so that the refugees could have a place to call home. But creating Israel took the effort of many people around the world. Those who worked on Resolution 181 in the UN, the Americans that served on a special cabinet committee under the chairmanship of Dr. Henry F. Grady, an Assistant Secretary of State, according to the Office of the Historian, and their British counterparts, along with countless others. This creation of Israel was an enormous change for the world, but it was accomplished by many people doing small things in a great way. Overall, Dr. King's quote to me is a different perspective on life and the change we each have over our world. The Underground Railroad and creation of Israel show perfectly that we need not have lots of power or influence to do great things, because small things done in harmony with the many can have a lasting effect. Our culture today looks back on famous figures as the few who caused great change, and tend to overlook changes without such people. But I believe Dr. King was telling us that the only limits small changes have are those we put upon ourselves. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Evelyn Cifuentes. I attend Bayshore High School, and I am in 11th grade. Boom, boom, boom. Those are the sounds of gunshots fired by teenagers in a gang, a drug negotiation resulting in a bloodbath. Our youth today is in gangs in the streets and selling drugs. If Martin Luther King Jr. were alive, he would tell us that no matter your upbringing, race, or color, you have the right to fight for what you believe and have the right to an education. To begin with, some of our youth today, mostly those born in poor households, have the mindset that just because they come from less, they are less. I mean, don't get me wrong, not everyone has that mindset, but unfortunately, many do. I know if Martin Luther King were alive, he would change those mindsets. He was a true born leader, one of the very few in history. His voice and speeches made those who didn't have hope have hope. He would tell our youth we can be anything if we put our minds to it. We can accomplish much. I know he would say that no matter where you live or how we look, we all have the same and equal opportunity to become something better and be better. That even if we live in the streets or in poor neighborhoods, we don't have to say we can't, because the truth is we can. Just because we come from a family who's involved in gangs does not mean we have to enter that world too. He would tell us that we can change our lives around and that we are the youth that will change history tomorrow. Secondly, Martin Luther King would tell us stealing and selling drugs isn't the way to get money or secure money in this world. He would fight for today's youth and tell us no matter the circumstances we're in, we will get through it, but not by doing the wrong thing. He would tell us that education and fighting for what's right in this world will get us success later in life. Not just because we will look a certain way means that we have to act and follow in the bad steps like them, but rather to be that one person that finds hope when there is none, and that gangs or the streets don't define us, but that we are the ones who define ourselves. That no matter the segregation we face, we are not compelled to act out about it, but will come forward and make a difference in this world and say that it's not right to treat someone any different just because of the way we look or where we come from. However, some people may argue that Martin Luther King did nothing in his life and had no real impact on anyone, but I believe he did. If he were alive, he would be doing great things in this world and in our youth. He would make everyone feel equal and help kids find motivation in doing the right things that would lead to excelling in life. All in all, Martin Luther King would tell the youth of today to rise up for what we believe is right and to not let anyone make us feel smaller because we're not. He would tell us that just because you're born in a poor upbringing or in a family with nothing but gangs, that doesn't define us. That just because all we know is the streets, it doesn't matter. Because we have the opportunity to be whoever we think we can be. He would say no matter our race or skin, we can succeed and have the same opportunities as anyone else. That we shouldn't let ourselves be treated as less just because we aren't a certain color. I believe he would make a great impact on our youth and open a lot of their eyes so that they could realize that no matter your skin, race, or upbringing, we are equal and can do whatever we put our minds to. But since he's not with us anymore, I'm here to let you know that no matter what, you can excel in anything. Thank you.
My name is Jonathan. I'm in 9th grade and I go to Lakewood Ranch High School. Martin Luther King once said, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way." Although Martin Luther King did do great things, this quote lets us know that dedication in certain subjects, if not on a major scale, can still make a difference. I also see the quote as a way of saying to try and change what you have control over and not to be something you're not. This quote also says to me that I can influence others, causing something great to happen just from putting in as much effort as possible and striving for excellence. To start, I believe this quote says to differentiate what you have control over and what you do not. For example, you do not have control over whether you can speak to 1,000 people at once or if you can change the world at first. Nevertheless, you do have the ability to work your way there by changing what you do have control over. For example, how hard you work and how much you really want something. American entrepreneur Jim Rohn said, "If you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If not, you'll find an excuse." This goes to show you can work your way up by doing great things on a smaller scale. Martin Luther King demonstrates this perfectly by getting through many obstacles but still finding a way to fight racism. As another point, this quote says to me that you don't need to be famous or extraordinary to make a change. When Martin Luther King said this, he spoke to all of us normal people. All it takes is finding what you like to do and what you do best, and working very hard in those subjects. Martin Luther King wasn't born into fame. He was put in the same, if not worse, conditions as us. He found his passion of speaking, writing, and bringing awareness to human rights. He worked very hard at what he did best, speaking and writing, and what he wanted to do most, to bring awareness to human rights. However, this does not mean you won't run into any hardships on the way. For example, Martin Luther King was arrested in 1963, and unlike most would do, he persevered. He wanted it so much that he kept going, and his legacy of promoting equal rights continues today. To sum it all up, the quote, "If I cannot do great things, I can do small things in a great way," says a lot to me. However, two main things stick out. First, it explains how if you work with what you can control, other than being someone you're not, it will make succeeding a lot easier. Secondly, the quote speaks to me about how I should find what I really want and what I'm good at and put my everything in that subject. This quote means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but when it comes to me, it's about hard work and dedication. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Jalissa Claremont and I'm a senior at Bayshore High School. There comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe nor politic nor popular, but he must take it because his conscience tells him that it is right. A quote written by the amazing Martin Luther King Jr., explaining why we need to speak up when violence occurs. As a senior in high school, I constantly hear about the hate, hurt, violence, and innocent shootings happening across our country. Although we have come such a long way since Dr. King was alive, it seems like we are taking several steps back in time, fighting violence with violence. It makes me think to myself, I wonder what he would say to the youth today. Many children are losing their lives they have not fully had a chance to explore. There are many contributions to why this is happening, but for me, I think the main culprit is due to the mishandling of distributions of guns. According to the Amnesty International, gun violence in the United States results in tens and thousands of deaths and injuries annually. In 2013, there were 73,505 non-fatal firearm injuries and 33,636 deaths due to injury of firearms. I believe if Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was still alive today, he would encourage us to stop turning to hate and violence to decrease racism, prejudice, bullying, and mistreatment of others. That using guns to harm others is never the answer. It just caused more death, more sadness, more negativity, and more of everything we desire to change or stop. Racism and equality were mainly what Dr. King focused on during his lifetime, but that's only because he ran out of time to continue the difference he was making. And it was cut short due to being shot by a gun. MLK would cry for our youth and plead with them to find other ways to stand up for our rights. He would want us to back down or stay silent. He would want us to be peaceful and act as leaders rather than following the flock. The only way this can be achieved is if we come together and start treating each other with respect, regardless of color, race, religion, or gender. We need to look outside the box and step outside of our comfort zone. For me, it is easy to want to come at someone who disagrees with me. It's been one of my downfalls. Over the past few years, my avid teacher has taught me that sometimes we can fight battles in different ways without becoming a doormat. When I think of MLK, I know he did the same. He was a true gentleman, held doors for women, played with little kids, prayed before a speech, and represented the Black community as someone we can respect. He didn't lay a hand on anyone. If we don't want history to repeat itself, which it already is, then we must do better as a younger generation. I know I want to give myself, my generation, and our children the chance to live a life for as long as God wishes. I want to be the change and come up with solutions instead of being a part of the problem. For as MLK once said, in the end we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Faith is taking the first step when we don't see the whole staircase. Let's finish climbing the staircase on behalf of MLK.
Well, that concludes our speakers for tonight. Let's give them all a hand. So the judges will now go to the back and tabulate the results, and we have refreshments for you guys, and we will see you shortly. So kind of stretch your legs and have some snacks. I wanted to start off by having you guys give all of our contestants one more round of applause. It is very difficult sometimes to get in front of a crowd and speak, and so it's something that we wanted to acknowledge. And I also wanted to acknowledge something that one of the judges said. We had that contestant that was nervous and kind of ran out, and we had one of our other contestants kind of pursue her out to say that she did a great job, and that's what we're trying to do today, have our young people support each other, and so I want you guys to give another hand. Everybody's waiting on me. Before we announce the winners, I would first like to recognize all of our wonderful sponsors, our unique, can I speak today? I was kind of choked up about the Unity Speak sponsor, Neal Communities. Let's give them a hand. Bells for providing the gifts that the finalists will receive tonight. MCR Health Services for providing the plaques for the contest winners that they'll receive next week. The Tillis Tutoring Center for providing the cash prizes that our grand prize winners and our other winners will receive next week. I would like to thank Mrs. Tillis in advance for the work that she's going to do with our contestants to get them even more ready for next week's presentations. I would like to thank CSNL and Blaylock Walters for providing the computers and the printers that will be received next week as well. And last but not least, I would like to thank Charles Clapsaddle and METV for coming and supporting and filming these events tonight. So let's give METV a hand. We just couldn't put this event together without the support of our sponsors, so we wanted to make sure we acknowledged them. Now, I know you're waiting, but we have some other things we need to do. So we have certificates and gifts for all of the contestants. So as your name is called, please come forward and receive your gifts. Sophie Bell. Spencer Boyer. Corey Cobbs. David Connolly. Jaleesa Ferguson. Miles Fetterman. Angelita Gudengesh. Brooke Lashke. Destiny Talbert. Melania Twyford. Layla Ward. Talia Belchmey. Evelyn Cifuentes. Jalissa Claremont. Sydney Jameson. Giovanni Jean. Delaney Krause. Benjamin Locke. Nick Stanley. Jonathan Stone. Angela Tuttle. Now finally on to our winners. We will start with the middle school category. We have an honorable mention candidate today, and this candidate is Angelina Gudengesh. She will receive a cash prize of $50. In third place in the middle school category and the winner of $75, Miles Fetterman. And in second place, and the winner of $100, Sophie Bell. And our grand prize winner, the winner of a brand new laptop and printer and $150, Layla Ward. Now on to our high school winners. In third place, and the winner of $75 is Benjamin Locke. And we actually had a tie for second place. So 2 second place winners. The first second place winner is Giovanni Jean. Giovanni will win a cash prize of $100. And our second place winner, and the winner of $100, Sydney Jameson. And our grand prize winner in the middle school category. I'm sorry, high school. High school. And the winner of a brand new laptop computer and printer and $150 in cash, Nick Stanley. And that concludes our festivities for tonight. Thank you so much for coming out and supporting our young people. And be safe on the road.